people are really passionate about technology and really seeing themselves as a technology developer to confront them and say, okay, now you have this idea, now you have to become a business person. So it's not necessarily our idea of we're in the business of changing what people are passionate about. What we do try to do is give them an understanding how they as a tech-driven person can start an initiative.
Hello, and welcome to the Future of University podcast series. My name is Todd Davey, Associate Partner at UIN and your host for today. In this episode, we explore student-driven entrepreneurship together with Bart van Grevenhof, Business Development Manager at the Technical University of Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Bart shares insights on fostering innovation through deep tech projects, how to overcome the challenges that students face in taking these technologies to market, and the role of industry partnerships. Welcome everybody. The topic of today is student-driven technology and entrepreneurship. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the case of Eindhoven University of Technology. And guiding us through that exploration process will be Bart van Grevenhof. Now, Bart is a senior business developer of student entrepreneurship at the Eindhoven University of Technology. And so he's going to be bringing some insights from their work. Also, if you're interested in training, UIN offers quite a large suite of training programs. You can find that on the UIN website under the training page in the direction of entrepreneurship, as well as the strategic partnerships and impact. Without further ado, welcome Bart.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's really nice to have you along. Bart is a business developer at the Technical University of Eindhoven, but we're specifically within the GATE Tech startup program. So he's going to provide some insights into that. He was previously also leading programs at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. And Bart, what I'm really excited about today is actually that we'll be speaking to someone very practical. So you're practically involved. Often we speak to directors of programs and things like that. We're actually going to be speaking with somebody who is practically supporting the students on a day-to-day basis. And so from that perspective, we're going to get some quite unique insights. I just thought you might introduce us to the concept of student teams and their role in fostering innovation at the Technical University of Eindhoven.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I joined 2.5 years ago, one of the first things I recognized, by the way, was I told my mom I'm going to join the Technical University of Eindhoven. And the first thing she knows is, hey, that's the place with the student teams. It's what we're well known for. And basically, it's a concept where students organize around self-chosen challenges. So that challenge can be anything from developing a car or developing a technology. And they organize around that in a nonprofit, or maybe it's most similar to a study association, where students rotate and come in. And for example, to give examples always work best, it's Team Daedalus. They work on building a drone with solar panels on the wing that can charge by day and survive the night, basically. And they work on building that technology, building that drone and that plane, and they can attract as many students as they want as volunteers, learn how that's organized. They look for sponsors and basically learn to be the 21st century engineer while doing that. And we have about 24 of those teams currently active. We see a lot of nice demonstrators, products coming out of that, but also a lot of new innovation coming out of that.
What I was interested to know a little bit more about was just in respect to this program, perhaps you can explain to us the vision for the program and then step us through actually practically how it works.
It all started with, and that is familiar, I think, to other universities, with competition teams who compete in, for example, like a solar challenge or like a university racing challenge. And that model of teams who develop, for example, a car to participate in that was applied to a broader set of challenges. For example, there was a professor here who said, hey, there is this interesting technology of iron fuel, where you use iron as a basis for heating or for preserving energy. And there was a group of students who was going to organize around that. And what happens then is that in that student team, they start working on, okay, what do we have to do to take this technology to the next level? And they're working on like certain sprints. Okay, can we build a demonstrator? Can we build a working prototype? And the program for us is a lot about supporting these teams. So there's supporting them with coaching, there's supporting them with, for example, how to organize as a team, with recruitment, but self-organizing teams, and their foundations are run by the students themselves. And where we come in as the gate and as the university and as a business developer is looking at, okay, what are you developing and how do you want to continue that after you reach a certain point within a student team? You cannot continue and you still want to make real impact with what you invented. And that's where the business development comes in and where we take it over and where, or not take over the support and help them to spin out of those teams.
Okay, so essentially then the vision seems to be that, generally speaking, engineers or tech-focused people are often really focused on the prototype. What you want them to be thinking about is beyond the prototype, as in how can you actually test this? How could you find a market for it? Things like that, I guess.
Yeah, and from the student team and more like, while there's still a student team, the vision is basically challenge-based learning and the most extreme version of challenge-based learning, like self-directed challenge-based learning in an extracurricular setting. As soon as they have an idea or an invention that has the potential or they're really passionate about to take to society and scale, yeah, then you're right. Then it becomes basically our challenge to help them flip their mindset from where they were mainly tech push to, okay, but now problem pool and what does society or what does the problem owner or a potential customer want?
And that can be quite challenging, especially with engineers, because they do love looking at the widget and trying to make it better and things like that. How do you achieve that?
One step back is that the student team also helps us delay a bit, where you would normally have a student with, for example, an idea and immediately tell them, okay, now we're going to talk about this. The student team gives them the option to lean into the tech development first. And indeed, when they run that course and when they have something tangible, then we start supporting them. But we start earlier with, for example, workshops on, okay, entrepreneurial thinking, and we start helping them also as an entity to be ready to have a spin out. So we want to like kind of plant that seed of, okay, what are you going to do next? You're working on this project now, but what's half a year, maybe even 4 or 5 years from now, what's ahead? And how can you be prepared? And how can you also train yourself to think in that way? So that's where we start. But as soon as there's like a real invention or a real idea, then we start working with them, for example, on thinking about, can you, for example, enroll in a student competition, a startup competition, to test and to see if that is something that you're interested in, to make that transition and to make that mental switch from tech push towards customer pull, basically.
I was keen to follow up a little bit about the sort of steps in the process that you guide them through. So they're inventing something, and I really like the way you described that. We let them lean into the engineering part or the technical part, and then work with them to market orientate and move through those steps. But perhaps you could just step us through what that sort of program might be or that sort of support might involve.
One day, for example, a team that is looking to develop the car of the future. We have a team like that to come out. And first of all, to do that's really like tech driven. Which technology do we want to implement in the car and those kinds. And the first nudge we have is when they're looking for sponsors for a car like that. And so that is where we pick around the corner, and we don't promise them like we have sponsors, but if you can show the value of why you're developing this, it might be easier to get a sponsor. So that's the first place we can do that. The other thing is being part of a student team is also connected to really being a student on the team and to studentship. So as soon as they start leaving the team and think, I'm going to miss this environment of the student team, it's like pretty flat hierarchy. It's like fast iterating. If I have any idea now, I can do that tomorrow. And that's also one of those points where you can say, hey, we have a program, we call it the Ready program. It's not focused on already like product market fit, but it's really focused on entrepreneurial thinking and that flipping mindset that we can introduce them to, like, hey, wouldn't this be something for you to join? And the third thing I would say is that showing them the right role models. Hey, where does a person with the skills of you who likes this kind of idea or who has this kind of idea that they want to continue on, and to introduce them to those, and to introduce them maybe to alumni who did the student team and spun out already. I think when you do that throughout that process, you start planting that seed and you start nudging that diehard engineer who's really proud of like all the tinkering with technology that they do to start thinking a little bit, okay, but this is quite challenging as well, to start making something technological that fits in the market or fits in society.
So almost giving them the opportunity to explore in terms of engineering, but then setting them a subsequent challenge, which is how you created it, but does it work in the market? Does it satisfy a need that exists in the market? I wanted to unpack a little bit of that, if I might, because one of the things that I am aware of with the program is the fact that, yeah, there's a project that's developing, but you seem to spend quite a bit of time on the student teams and the individuals to develop their skills and also their leadership abilities. Perhaps you could just talk through how that works?
Well, let me start it. Most of the leadership development and the skill development is done by the students themselves. And the foundations and the student teams are autonomous, and they are the ones looking for, and way more successful than us, for funding and for collaborations and those kind of things. So they're really leading the charge in their own development and seeing, hey, this is where I need to learn. This is what we need to do as a team. But it's true that we can help them. We see some common denominators like throughout the year, because it's rotating teams. We can offer them trainings. And that's part done by Innovation Space, who really basically does the student team support on a day-to-day basis. And as a gate, we try to help them more like, how are you as a foundation ready to support a spin out? And how are you ready as a student to spin out or to take these entrepreneurial talents somewhere else? So that is where we jump in.
And when it comes to that sort of process, as there might be thinking about creating a spin out, what sort of support or coaching do you have at that point?
We focus on kind of three things. And the first thing is similar what a KTO does for a university. Because these are foundations and these foundations are run by students and alumni of the team themselves, it's also important to think about, okay, how do you support as a foundation an ID spinning out? Do you have your IP covered? Do you have, for example, partnership agreements, but also other kind of deal terms in place? And is there a mechanism if you're with 70 students on a team and everybody wants to spin out? That's quite a short runway or a steep funding challenge. So how do you arrange those kind of things? And that is where we try to, on one-on-one talks, especially with the teams, like show them where the need is and try to give them an understanding without having them to do a whole innovation management master at all. So it's basically demand driven. The other thing we do is when they have really a concept, basically a technology or even the early stages of a problem solution fit, then they can use the same incubation programs and early stage incubation programs as, for example, researchers can use, that we co-organize here in the region of the Brainport together with other partners. And we start onboarding them as business developers, student entrepreneurship, regular coaching, introduce them to a community of other student startups, really early stage. And it's not exactly like a cohort-based pre-incubator, but it serves the same. And the third thing is really individual-based, because students don't always spin out with an ID, but we are looking for entrepreneurial talent within this pool of students to connect to other startups or to connect to university spin-outs.
I wanted to just ask you a little bit about the entry into the program. How do you scout your entrepreneurial students or your entrepreneurial talent potentially? And then going through that process of teaming up, it sounds like it's very much self-selecting, but I guess you provide some sort of platform or format for that to happen as well.
We try to do that as much as possible. First thing is that kind of like when we're looking for talent, the one thing we don't try to do is like, people are really passionate about technology and really seeing themselves as technology driven or technology developer, to confront them and say, okay, now you have this idea, now you have to become a business person. So it's not necessarily our idea of, we're in the business of changing like what people are passionate about. What we do try to do is give them an understanding how they as a tech driven person can start an initiative. They can find people in their environment. And what we also try to do is ask students to sign up with us, both when they're looking for somebody or when they want to join somebody. And we're in the early stages of this, but one of the lucky things we at the moment have is a former chairwoman from the University of Tilburg who ran the student business club there. And one of the things we tried to do is try to make those connections with a more business-minded university. We have the Fontes University close by. We also have a University of Applied Science with a business school. And where we try to make those connections and when we try to make those introductions. But that is mostly manual basis. We know where the vacancies are, we know where the people are, and we try to set up that first cup of coffee or first date as you want.
And speaking of that, once you've got a project or a team that is moving through the program and potentially they have something interesting, whether you've identified it or one of your teams identified it, how do you then, or what do you then do in terms of finding funding, or you mentioned sponsorship, or in other words, linking them up with some of your partners? So how does that process look like?
The process often starts, and we tell them like it's a process, it's not an event. It's not, okay, you suddenly think of something and then you spin out. It's more like corporate venturing, where there is a team within a student team who is starting to champion kind of the idea that eventually will spin out. And the advantage there is that, of course, non-profit and it's sponsorship based, but they can start putting out feelers in the market and, for example, participate in some competitions to get some early stage funding. The other advantage there is that there are a lot of subsidies and grants in the, like here in the region, but also European, where you can participate, and then the partners or the sponsors of the teams can be really interesting partners to team up with and start these projects on like early feasibility studies, and to make sure you hit the ground running as a team. And especially that linkage with smart looking for early stage bootstrapping money, grants, and those partnerships and the supporting environment that can make sure that when the time is there, an idea to spin out and to be on their own, they really have a fighting chance.
It sounds a little bit like a venture client type model, in that when you're looking at some of your partners, are they going to be potentially the client, or could they be looking at some sort of investment in the company as well?
Most of the time, they're either one of the supply chain partners or a potential client. But lucky enough, we have a regional investment firm. It's called the BOM in Brabant. And also there, we work closely together with them to, for example, provide next stage funding when the grant opportunities run out. And I think 1.5 years ago, they launched a student-run venture capital fund. That is also a really nice opportunity for next stage funding for these student teams, because most of them are involved in development and research heavy, R&D heavy ideas that still have some way to go until to the market. So they have some need for some money to do that.
One of the things that you have as an asset, a distinct asset, obviously, is the fabulous technology ecosystem around Eindhoven, and specifically wanted to talk about Brainport Eindhoven. Perhaps you could just explain what that is and what makes it unique.
I don't know if everybody knows what Eindhoven Brainport is. I saw some people in the chat with from Turkey, but basically Eindhoven is in the south of the Netherlands, and it's just as far away from Amsterdam as from Antwerp and the German rural area. We're a metropolitan area with about 750,000 people. The area is home to companies like ASML. Philips, of course, is the big, turn of the previous century, the big company that started it all. And I think we're ranked 6th or 7th in the world on patents per capita, and we're responsible for 12.5% of the GDP in the Netherlands. So there's a big economic driver behind it. And that's the environment where these student teams and where these student startups, they operate in it.
And you mentioned that you link in with other institutions here, such as Pontus University of Applied Sciences, as well as Tilburg. How does that work? Can students from those universities also participate in the program, or their potential partners in the program?
Yeah, I would say that my comment there is 50% ambition and wish and 50% reality. But the thing we see most successful is, again, when students undertake that action themselves. We can top down try to organize all kinds of meetups and events where they meet up. And the funny thing is that I gave the example of one of our student assistants working here, who is just after work talking to some of these students, starting to say, oh, you should talk to this student or that student. When that meeting is there and at our students with a little bit of a beer sometimes, then you see that kind of things organically coming into play.
Given that obviously it has a high tech focus and the program itself embraces deep tech, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the uniqueness of deep tech as opposed to other verticals, other focus. So, for example, if it's more of a social sciences type project, consulting type project, how does deep tech differ, and what sort of requirements do you think it has in terms of support?
As you said, I started at Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, and Amsterdam, and especially University of Applied Sciences, is not really a deep tech environment. And I think the first thing is that levels are obviously lower, and so the journey you have to undertake to get to the market, to get to a solution, those are longer. When you look at then teams 22, 23, 24-year-old with let's say a regular student startup, the hill is already steep, but then this one is even a little bit steeper. So the challenges here are, how do you find funding? And as you need more funding, trust in you and trust in yourself as an organization, as a startup is essential, because the amounts of money we're talking about are bigger. So you need more trust from those who fund you and finance you. And I think that is the main thing going into it. And that is also where, for example, these student teams are really a nice fit, because first of all, let's say you have a technology around TRL level 4, these student teams can start thinking with it and without risk and sponsorship, get it to a couple of next stages without really having to create any debt or having to lose any equity. And then the experience they did, the credit, the trust they got earned by the partners and saw what they developed, that can really help them ignite after that. And that is something they can leverage with, hey, we got already 2-3 years experience working on this technology that they can leverage in a VC marketplace against other startups. And that can help them like really start up. And I think that is both, well, I think recognizable talent for deep tech startups, but it's also where these student teams come into play and where they can help students overcome this doubt or lack of trust that they will be initially granted when they would have started in a startup route right away.
So we have a lot of part of our community who are in your position where they're looking to support student startups. So what advice would you give for those wanting to support specifically deep tech? You've mentioned some of the difficulties, the longer time frame, need for patience and things like that. How do you best support student teams going through that process?
Two things are essential here for us. I think one of them is teaming up internally and having the support. And some of these student teams are even ignited by professors and PhD students and researchers. And these student teams couldn't exist without the knowledge base of the university, without a connection to the university. So having really good connections there and having them engaging with the students and with the students themselves one side. On the other side, there's the ecosystem. These student teams don't only come to the ecosystem and to like organizations for sponsorship, they come there for advice. And some of these organizations actually pretty smart. They're organizations that say, hey, we have, for example, a sensor or like a chipset that we've been developing and we want to test in a real life environment. Can you do that for us? Can we put this in your rocket? Can we put this in your car? And this is also, and of course, there's something in it for them as well, because these student teams produce great alumni and great people for them as potential workforce. But they also deliver a lot of context, a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise, and a lot of network access that can help these student teams basically succeed in this area of deep tech.
Okay, so there's a lot of linking and connecting in that process. What does some success look like for you? If you had to describe, maybe not a success story just yet, we'll come to that, but just what a success at the end of the process, you say, oh, that was a success. How would you describe that?
It is challenge-based learning. So the primary success is learning. And also when students even undertake like a startup journey and they don't succeed, it's our inclination to say, okay, you tried to be deliberative. What are these learnings that you take along? But if it was only learning, I wouldn't have the role of business developer. I would be like an entrepreneurship educator. So sure, we want these technologies also to get to the market. We want them to provide, and we see that with some of the alumni story, provide new jobs to our alumni. We want them to create a broader economical growth next to the companies of ASML and Philips, for example. So yeah, it's multifaceted and it starts with learning, but there's definitely a societal impact, sustainable impact, and also economical impact in the region involved.
Okay, then maybe leading into some of the success stories that have been through the program and through that ecosystem, perhaps you could talk a little bit about that.
Some of them are before I got here. I told you about like iron fuel and a professor starting this first honors team, and after that a student team based around the idea that you can burn iron and create fuel from that. So one of the startups coming out of that team, the team is called Team Solid. That is Team Rift. And what they basically want to do is decarbonize industrial heating by using iron as a fuel. And they got funding by I believe the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And they're one story below me in the building where I'm right now. And I'm thinking they always almost are too big to be here, so they'll be looking for a little bit of another place. And the thing that makes that kind of a success story for me is that they came from the student team. They got this professor who said, hey, there might be something in this technology, iron fuel technology. There's a startup coming out of that. But the student team after that didn't stop existing. They reinvented themselves, and they're right now building and working on a technology that allows you to store hydrogen in iron pellets. Almost sounds like magic, and so they reinvented themselves, and then they're going to be like in 2-3 years' time, I think we can do this again and we can talk about them. And that is really nice to see
No, it's a fantastic story. What I love about it is the resilience, pivoting and maybe looking at something else, but the team stays together and functions and profits from it. We have a question from Salahattin. In the Turkish entrepreneurship ecosystem, students wait to run their tech businesses after graduation. How is it in Eindhoven, and are there any specific programs? So maybe you can talk about the timing of when this hits in their schedule.
First of all, alumni who go through to the student teams, and there you see they get addicted to being in that kind of environment. And some of them we see exiting, for example, to traineeships of big companies or those kind of things. And then we see them coming back, because within big companies, and there's a couple of layers above you. It's not the direct impact. You don't have the autonomy. You don't have that much direct input on the purpose of the company, and you see them flocking back. We see that like student team alumni are looking and are, I think, more inclined. I cannot put that really in numbers, but more sense of feeling to continue that right away, because they're like, hey, I like this environment, this fast-paced environment, fast iterating environment. As to the students who graduate without student team experience, I also think that currently there is, like in our region, so much asked for educated engineers by ASML, by those kind of companies, that like the opportunity cost of starting your own startup and starting your own versus having that first good paid job, leaving that dorm room behind, that's a pretty competitive thing. But having an entrepreneurial experience during your bachelor or master's, then taking that work experience and then coming back to for example, to the gate in the university in 7-8 years, with that network, with that work experience, that's a pretty positive outcome for me as well. Yeah, I think it's similar as in Turkey. Depends a little bit on the students, but I wouldn't worry about it. Let them get the network, let them get the experience, and then have a good alumni network. Keep in touch with them.
Thank you very much, Bart. I've really enjoyed the chat today, mate. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, but specifically about the student-driven entrepreneurship happening at Eindhoven University of Technology. This has been Bart van Grevenhof, who's the Business Development Manager at Eindhoven University of Technology. Thank you very much, Bart, for your time today, and thank you to everybody for participating and coming along. Thank you for listening to today's discussion. Follow UIIN on LinkedIn, and if you're enjoying our podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review in your podcast platform of choice to help other people find this content too.